Hi everyone, welcome back to another session of Bhagavad Gita introductions. We are still in introduction. This is our ninth session. If you're following along, we are reading from Bhagavad Gita as it is by A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. If you have a hardbound Bhagavad Gita book, we are on page 20 and we will cover 20 and 21 today. You can also look up online in vedabase.com. I'm sure you will find the topic that we are discussing there as well. Just to recap what we discussed last week, Krishna took us on a tour of the spiritual world. Krishna said, in the spiritual world, there is no need of sun, moon, electricity, or fire. Why? Because Krishna lives in the spiritual world and Krishna's body is all effulgent. We discussed the light coming from Krishna's body is like thousand suns rising at one time. And because the whole planet is illuminated by the light that is coming from Krishna's body, there is no need of external light like sun, moon, fire, and electricity. Another feature we discussed of the spiritual world is in the spiritual world, there is no birth, death, old age, and disease. And Krishna said, once we go there, we don't return from there. So, Krishna is encouraging us to go to the spiritual world. We also saw interplanetary travel. Krishna said that we can go from one planet to another planet by worshipping the controller or the demigod of that planet. And in the end, Krishna gave his recommendation. He said, although you can go from one planet to another in this material world, he is still encouraging us to go to the spiritual world because other planets in the material world still are having the same four problems that we have today, which are birth, death, old age, and disease. So, this is what we covered last week, and we will begin this week with Krishna describing the material world, and he will give us the tips and tricks of how to attain the spiritual world. And in the end, he will give us his recommendation. So let's start with prayers. Pamagyanatimrandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. I offer my respectful obeisances unto my spiritual master, who, with the torchlight of knowledge, has opened my eyes which were blinded by the darkness of ignorance. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. My dear Lord, and the spiritual energy of the Lord, kindly engage me in your service. I am now embarrassed with the material service. Please engage me in your service. Description of the material world. So, if we see, what do we see? The picture we see is the picture of an upside down tree. It is reflection of a tree in the water. So if you observe this picture carefully, we see the trunk of the tree and the branches of the tree going upwards and the leaves of the tree going downwards, which is exactly the opposite of the real tree. In the real tree, we see the leaves going upwards and the branches and the trunk and the roots going downwards. But in the reflection of the tree, we see a completely opposite picture. And Krishna is saying material world is a reflection of the spiritual world. And what he means to say by that is the actual substance is the spiritual world, and material world is just a reflection of the spiritual world. Just like imagine the shadow, the object moves and the shadow moves behind the object. So the shadow by itself does not have any sustenance. The shadow by default will just go along with the object. The actual substance is the object. And Krishna is saying the actual substance is the spiritual world. And whatever we are seeing here in the material world is just a reflection, is just a shadow. Further, he's describing by giving an example that in the desert there's actually no water, but it may feel like there is water at a distance, but the closer you go, the water actually does not exist. And Krishna is saying similarly, in the material world, there does not exist any happiness, although there may be a feel of some kind of happiness, like there is a feel of water being present in the desert. There is a feeling of happiness being present in the material world. In reality, the happiness does not exist in the material world. Where does the happiness exist? The happiness exists in the spiritual world, like the real tree is the spiritual world, and what we see in this material world is just a reflection of the spiritual world. And Krishna is encouraging us to aim for, to hanker for, to make spiritual world as our destination to go to. Why? Because in the spiritual world there is no birth, death, old age and disease. The spiritual world is the same nature as Krishna. Spiritual world is eternal. And so Krishna is encouraging us, is enthusing us to strive in this life to go to the spiritual world and not hang around with the reflection. Further, Krishna explains how one can attain this spiritual world. What are we doing in this material world? Krishna says we are all wanting to become Sir. I want to become a king, I want to become a rich man, I want to become a president, I want to become the CEO of a company. So I have all these desires, and this is what I want to become in this material world. And what are these? Krishna says these are designations, and I am running behind these designations today. Why? Because I am attached to these designations. I like when people say, "Oh, you're a rich man. Oh, you're a CEO of the company." I feel something. I want that designation, and I'm striving in my life to attain that designation. Krishna is saying these designations belong to the body. And like we leave this body in this world, when we quit this world, we will leave these designations in this world as we quit this world. So, all my life, I run behind these designations, and at the end, I leave the body along with these designations to quit the world. So, I ran behind a reflection all my life, not knowing that it's a shadow, it's not the actual object. So, all my life, I'm living as if I am this body. In actuality, this body is just a reflection or a shadow of the real substance, which is the soul. The soul that lives inside this body is the real substance, and this body that's manifested is a reflection, is a shadow of that soul that's living inside the body. And Krishna is saying, pay attention to the soul. Don't run behind the reflection. Pay attention to the actual tree and don't become so engrossed in the reflection of the tree. In Bhagavad Gita, chapter 8, verse number 5, Krishna says, whoever at the end of this life quits his body, remembering me alone, at once attains my nature. Of this, there is no doubt. And what is Krishna's nature? Krishna's nature is eternal, that which does not have a beginning and that which does not have an end. So, if we attain Krishna's nature by default, we are solving the four basic problems of life: birth, death, old age, and disease. We won't have these four if we attain the nature as Krishna. And how can we attain that? Krishna is saying, at the end of this life, remember me. So when we are leaving this body, remember Krishna. Now, what does one usually remember when one leaves his body? One remembers that to which one is attached. If one is attached to one's wealth, property, children, whatever one is attached to, one's mind automatically goes to that particular thing at the time one is leaving this world. So, in essence, Krishna is telling us, become attached to me, to Krishna. And by becoming attached to Krishna, at the time we leave this body, we remember Krishna and then we go back to the spiritual world. So, Krishna here is giving us a formula of how to attain the spiritual world. He's saying, according to our activities in this life, we either sink or rise. What does that mean? It means I may do good activities, and by doing those good activities, I am creating a body, a good body for myself in for my next life. And if I do not so good activities, then I'm creating a not so good body for myself in my next life. So, Krishna is taking our attention from this life to next life. And he's saying, be careful of what activities we perform, because that is giving rise to another body which will come to you after this body. So, this life is a preparation of next life. So, the activities that we are doing today is kind of preparing for our next life. So, we have to carefully choose the activities that we perform. So, we end up going to the spiritual world and not have to take another body and another birth in this material world. And here is the recommendation of Bhagavad Gita. Krishna is saying, hanker to go to the spiritual world. There is no happiness in this material world. The material world is a reflection of the spiritual world. The real happiness lies in the spiritual world. So let's all hanker, try, and strive, do our best to go to the spiritual world, which is the only place that is free from birth, death, old age, and disease. And that's the reason Krishna is saying, aim to go to the spiritual world. How? Here is one method, here is one activity that Krishna is recommending and suggesting for us to choose this activity so that it will help us to go back to the spiritual world, because it will make us attached to Krishna. And that activity is chanting of the holy name. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So, summary of today's verse is, we saw Krishna giving us, Krishna is telling us how, Krishna gave us a description of the material world. He's describing how this material world looks like. It's like a reflection of the upside down tree. There is no happiness that lies in this material world. The real happiness is in the spiritual world. Krishna talks about how to attain the spiritual world. He says, at the end of this life, you remember me and you come back to me. So, until we practice that throughout our life, we will not remember Krishna at the time of death. So, the recommendation of Bhagavad Gita is we chant the holy name of the Lord. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. By the chanting of the holy name, we help ourselves to go back to the spiritual world and become free from birth, death, old age, and disease, and never come back to this material world. That is the recommendation of Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita to us. Please feel free to send any questions if you have. You can text me, or you can ping me later on if you need to. So, we will be continuing further on introduction in our coming sessions. Thank you so much for watching and liking the videos. It's very encouraging for me. I would recommend as an application exercise for all of us to practice the chanting of the holy name. If you could, if you are not already chanting, for those of us who are not already chanting, if you could set aside 10 minutes in your day and chant the holy name, we will see the result and we will appreciate the teaching and experience it at the same time as we are reading and moving along, learning other teachings of Bhagavad Gita. So, all the best to all of you. Wish you all a very happy Diwali and a great week ahead. Thank you for watching. Hare Krishna.